3 clicks in a row, and the third one got lucky. So I'm almost live. Zoom to YouTube, setting it up. Redirect is happening, and we should be up. Okay. And there's Christy. Hey, Christy. Welcome.
So are we good to go?
We are, but I have right before Tim takes over with new material, I threw something in on the digital copy, but I just thought I'd give you guys a heads up. I wanted like 3 minutes to share some new stuff that I'd like to show you. And it's
Before leftovers?
yeah, right before leftovers.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So welcome, Len. It's good to have you with us. If you could drop something in the chat or just let us know if you wish to participate or just listen, we would appreciate knowing that. Hey, you! How did you get to be Len Larson?
Your mic is not open, my dear.
I'm using his computer.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to see you, Jacqueline. So Brent is here. I think we're good to go get started.
We are.
All righty. Just a few announcements before we get going. Blair has something he calls insider notes. They are a deeper dive to everything that we discuss on this program. So if you want to study and learn more of the material, go deeper. He has all the episodes starting with 318 going forward for $25 a month and $300 a year at blairdunkly.com/BDE-insider-notes. He also has something called the My Model Mastery Secrets podcast, which there are 4 episodes on there right now.
Correct. And soon to be
4 episodes more. And new episodes that are going to be coming, and we will keep you up to date on that when we get more up-to-date information, but that is mymodelmastery.podbean.com. He also has My Model Method Coach training scheduled for September 16 through 19, September 30 through October 3rd. So if you wish to know about that, do you want them to contact you, Blair? Blair Dunkley?
I would love that if they would. What I can do is, whoopsie. I will, just reach out to me or sent at rewiringthemind.com.
So would it be Blair Dunkley at Rewiring the Mind?
Or it would be Blair at rewiringthemind.com.
Okay, Blair, BLAIR at rewiringthemind.com.
Correct.
So if you wish more information about My Model Method Coach training, this is a highly effective investment that you can make in yourself. It's also a direction you can go business-wise to become a coach. Many people have taken this class and applied it to their own lives with life-changing results. So just want to encourage you that if you've got some curiosity questions, reach out to Blair. He'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
So this is the 353rd episode of the Blair Dunkley Experience. Welcome, welcome. This is where we discuss My Models. My Models are a collection of extensively tested thought frameworks, skills, and behaviors that enable people to transform their lives intentionally. Your host for this evening is Blair Dunkley, the creator of My Models. My name is Patty. I'm a certified My Model Method coach, and your co-hosts tonight are My Model Method coaches Tim and Becky Graff and Colin Jewett, all of whom are certified. The BDE is Blair's free gift to you and is an opportunity to learn, experience, and practice My Models in a safe, real-world environment. Personally, My Models helped me overcome more than a decade of depression They have positively impacted my life in every area, including my relationship with myself. So we look forward to learning with you tonight and welcome you to the BDE. So Blair, if you would like to take your 3 minutes for something new, this is your moment.
I would. I have been working on the insider notes, but as a result of getting things into the insider notes, I have also been working on a mind map of mind models. So what I'd like to do is share that with you briefly right now. So this is the mind map. And as you can see mind models, definitions, key models, benefits and impact, and right here is context and series. So what we can do here is I'm just going to bring that back a little bit, move that over. And when you click here, people going through Mind Model Method Coach training will be able to go through and start getting more information about this. And so mind models are, as Patty said, a collection of tested thought frameworks, skills, and behaviors, and enabling intentional life transformation, and yet identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable. Well, that's definition stuff. That's all there. But then we go into, here's the list. A non-complete list, but a substantial list of mind models. Now, when you click on some of those over time, what happens is they will go in the software here, are actually AI stuff. They will build out a rather substantial background on what's available. Well, actually, I should probably do one here. Probably something like, I don't know. Well, safety versus comfort. That's a good one. We just did that one recently. So what happens is, based on the work that I've done, it will then describe safety versus comfort and define what safety is and what comfort is. Then it goes on to the impact on behavior. Then it goes into how safety versus comfort functions with other mind models. And naming and labeling, clarity and certainty, self-other situation, the 3 E's, and on and on and on. And then it goes into overall benefits and impact as well. So faster personal growth, enhanced decision-making, improved emotional management, overcome stuck states. Those are the top 5 right there. So that's really what this stuff does in every area. And then it gets into this. These are the areas of your life that can be transformed. And so far, with this small group of the last 8 of the BDE, these are the 3 primary bits of information. But as you can see, it's rather in-depth, to just say. So I just wanted to share that with you and start showing you how that stuff dives in, how deep it goes. And in fact, some of the mind models, like safety versus comfort, and other ones like ANANPU, awareness, notice, process, understand, actually build out stacks of mind models. What mind models pair very effectively to work with depression, work with PTSD, work with whatever. So those are the things that we've discussed here, but all these are now documented and don't have to be thought through, or you don't have to try and remember. You click the button and poof, there's the stack, there's the stuff, and there's how to apply it. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. that's been a little piece of work that I've put together over the last, well, all of that represents decades of my life, but figuring this stuff out over the last couple of weeks. I started on it last week and thought I'd show it off tonight. So that's
Well, we're glad
basically,
that you did. That's really a very exciting um, thing to access, and that's accessed. That mind model map is
it's not
accessed.
available. It's not out there yet, but it's going to be.
Okay, but it will be available through the insider notes.
No, it's going to be available to coaches.
Oh, to coaches. Okay.
Yep.
How how do you intend for coaches to access that?
I haven't figured that out yet. That's where I am
Okay, so
next.
we're
I just
getting
got
really
this
new stuff.
and I got super excited and I went, this stuff is gold. So, because you start taking a look at it and you have somebody with, let's say, PTSD, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got um, a path, at least one to start working with. It's not guaranteed, like it's not like, oh, this is it, this is how it works, but these have high probabilities.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, I can't argue against the AI's argument for these stacks that it's because they're already in our notes, by the way. None of this is pulled out of anything else other than this reboot series notes. Okay, so that's the primary chunk. So it's rather impressive.
It's very impressive. And I just want to add that when you take my model method coach training and you certify as a coach, you become part of a community where Blair is developing ongoing resources, and we're here to support one another. So this is a really an excellent community to invest in and to join. So with that, Tim, would you like to take over with leftovers and new material?
Sure. Yeah, this is exciting stuff, Blair. I'm, as Shane put in the comments, I love it like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. I'm excited for those notes and that addition to the coaches. That'll be such a value to what we already have as mind model method coaches. So that's way exciting stuff. That's really cool coming through.
Yeah.
Just being able to go, click and get all the information right there at fingertips. So that's really cool work.
Thank you.
Moving into, I wanted to check in with everybody really quick before we dive into the new material today. And last week we discussed remember versus relive. And remember versus relive, as we kind of talked about last week, we find ourselves more often than not either remembering something or reliving something. And so I was curious, checking in with everybody. Has anybody had an experience or had something they noticed that came up for them over the last week with remember versus relive? Or just an aha moment maybe from last week?
Well, maybe what I'll do is I will share, unless somebody else wants to share, because two more
Yeah, I'll
people.
share something.
Okay, go for it.
Cool.
Yeah, I believe this was last week, was the mirror neurons being different for each person and
Mhm.
how that affects the like reliving in putting yourself into others' stories, that projection, like that talk last week was very interesting on how that works and how people can, some people are get really into other, I don't know, like the feelings and that of other people's stories and how and some people don't. So that knowing that difference is there kind of puts more context to how people are and if you observing that and also myself and other people being okay in this situation, I'm sometimes used to find myself going like, am I supposed to feel the same way this person does when they're talking to us? Like I don't get into the story like them and I don't have the feelings. Is there something wrong with me? And now I used to think that I was like, well, maybe not. I just wasn't able to match that and it was just it is what it is. It wasn't like I didn't really it wasn't mine. So So there was that questioning, like, is there a correct way to act? At that time, that's the way I was thinking. It's like, I'm not quite sure. So, but learning the mind models but specifically that's what brought that up was thinking about that and how this all works and just more digging more into seeing how it works and your brain, how that impacts like the way the mind models work, using them, how they'll work with the brain, like how the brain functions and then how they work.
Hmm.
Great stuff. Thank you for sharing, Brent.
One
Anybody
of the
else?
one
Yeah.
of the stories that I did want to share was with a client of mine. We got talking briefly about mirror neurons as well, but it spun into another thing that I don't frequently bring up, but I thought I should share this one here. And that is having violent agreements. And violent agreements are about when people are using um, sometimes the same word, but both parties have different meanings for the same word. So they think they're aligning, but then they get into a very strong argument. But we can also do it where people are using two different words, but actually having the same argument. Both are violent agreements because we argue back and forth trying to prove that our word or our position is better than the other one because it's into the three P's, uh, prove, position, and process. But we're not using process, we're just using proven position. So that one was a big one that my client was referencing, and it was like he learned that, and it was just wild because he'd never seen that before, and then he could not see it all week long, like three or four very key examples of where that came into play. And again, it's about creating alignment or that subtle misalignment where it seems like it could be aligned like this, but if you change the angle, it's actually not aligned. So, okay. Anyway, just thought I'd share.
Go ahead. We
What?
both went to talk at the same time, so I'm gonna let her
Oh,
go.
One of the things that Tim and I actually were chatting about over the weekend, since we had last week, was how when we first started learning the mind models, we were very much one or the other is more effective than the other. Okay, so clarity is much more effective than certainty. And when we're talking about, remember versus relive, we got into a kind of a deep conversation. I don't know that I wouldn't say that we experienced any of the violent agreements, but it was very interesting that with the mind models, there is not a judgment of which one's better or worse or like even the pairings, because there are times and spaces where you need to or have the opportunity to fluidly navigate between the two. For me as a writer, sometimes reliving is extremely effective to be able to get into the emotion and pull out the details or marketing. However, in a personal perspective, if I'm having a rough day and like staying in that place is not effective. And so being able to ebb and flow between the two, where it's what's effective based on what we're going for. And we chatted about this a little bit recently with the deeper dive, is that we have pairings and there is one that's predominantly more effective. However, it doesn't mean the other thing is like judgment. It's not wrong and bad and horrible and all the things. It has time and place based on your intention and intentionality and use of the thing, just like violent agreements. Okay. You can have a different meaning and different name and label. Doesn't mean that either one of the people are wrong or bad. It's just the way that we're coming to an alignment. And I think this is a great segue into our conversation tonight.
Yep.
Is bringing it into a place of can we be in alignment with or find clarity around your perception, your name and label and definition, and mine, so that we can work together on the same page moving forward. That's what I want to share.
And so with
I do want to touch base on one last thing there because I loved where you went with it. And I don't know if our listeners might be as astute to pick up your language, but this is also what my client wound up doing was commenting on the three E's, especially the language of effective versus ineffective, because it is highly non-judgmental. And so listening from that perspective, everything changes and it becomes highly effective. So I'll leave it there and let you guys take it away.
So I did have a question with when we talk about the pairings, Blair. I had a question for you, and actually Becky and I were discussing this earlier. Tonight's conversation and the new material that we're going to get in tonight is self, situation, and other. Now, the question I have for you, Blair, and the curiosity that's coming up for me, and maybe you can help me clarify, and maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. I call it self, situation, other. I've heard others say self, other, situation. Does it matter necessarily in which order? Is there a more effective way to have the pairing?
There is.
Okay.
And so which out of the three, let me just ask you some questions here. Out of those three, which is the thing that most people focus on most of the time, self, other, or situation?
So this was the curious question that Becky and I, or the discussion that we had earlier. For me, self is first.
Correct. Now I'm going to pause you there.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, because self is first in excess, depends on the group I studied, but they were all over 90%. Okay, so it's very strong.
Okay.
Now the next one out of other and situation, where what do you think the focus is likely going to be on for most people?
For most people, well, see, and this is where we had a discussion earlier because I go situation.
And
You're right.
and
But that's also a tell, particularly for your background.
Okay.
That plays a huge role in where people come from.
Interesting. Okay. And then obviously for me, third would be other.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think about it simply from the lens of, with self, because that is me and how I interplay with the other two. That is the one thing, well, and we'll get into this, but then we find ourselves in different situations as we go throughout life. And occasionally there are others that are involved. Occasionally there may be situations where there aren't other involved. So I guess when I think about self, situation, and other, that's where I was thinking through that lens.
Right. However, that's not a common one.
Okay.
Okay, that flow is not common. Self-situation, and having been through self-situation another and self-other situation, the reality of things is your socialization at a given point in your life and where you wound up socializing. You were a truck driver
For
for
many
quite a
years.
chunk of your life.
Yep. For a good 20 years. Yep.
Right. That's huge. So all of a sudden, your situation that you found yourself in was your primary domain, like self and situation.
Mhm.
Okay. Whereas most people who don't work that style of work, basically by yourself doing your thing alone without involvement from others, tend to go self situation, others. Okay. Shift workers, I found at Life Skills, isolated shift workers tended to do that the most. So that was the key element there.
Okay.
Okay. But the majority of people now, self is 90%, like 90+%. Now, but other is the second most dominant one. But that is in the 65 to 75% range, depending on the group and everything else. So that's the next biggest. And the smallest is situation. But they all are subordinate to self, with a rare exception that sometimes some people who have been bullied are in a abusive situation, put others first out of self-preservation, other situations self. So it became a tell for me when I was profiling people. How did they position themselves against their story? Where were they? And, one of the things that you'll see is mothers, stay-at-home moms, would frequently be putting other situations self because they'd be the low person, they'd refer to themselves as the low man on the totem pole. Okay, so and that can be again situational.
Interesting.
So this self-other situation is a fascinating mind model because it is so indicative of where somebody is at over time and in the moment. Okay, so that's very telling, very, very, very fascinating, I found.
Yeah.
So
Blair,
Blair,
when you were
Colin put
hearing
in the
that,
chat, Colin put in the chat, a gender related. Do you
With-
find that there's a gender
There,
self situation, other more more male related?
yeah, it is socioeconomic,
Oh,
gender and socioeconomic. Now, men who are, I used to work with abused people at Life Skills College, and there is quite a unacknowledged but large number of, not huge, not like women for being abused, but there are a large number of men that are abused by women, by their wives, getting hit with frying pans and everything else, like you name it. They get beaten up and they don't fight back. And if the police are called because of neighbors hearing fights, the guy is arrested and the woman did all the damage. It is rare that it actually is that the expectation is that the guy is the abuser. That's what it is. But I have it on good authority from the abusers who used to pull that shit so they didn't get into trouble. Okay, Jackie, you're nodding your head vehemently in agreement. Yeah.
I've even witnessed that stuff, and the wives think it's funny just to
Yep.
kind of like poke them in like the private area, like, hey, behave. I'm like, did you just poke him in his penis? Are you serious? But like, I mean, because it just shocked me. I've seen people like women who do some really nasty things and think it's okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And the guy is supposed to be able to take it, and and also the embarrassment of coming forward to the police and say, oh no, my wife beat me up. Which guy really wants to say that?
No guy. Well, very
Not
few have the
few.
courage to be able to do that. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah.
So it is suffering in silence and quite a percentage. So I don't have numbers. I haven't found even a study on that. I just know at Life Skills College, when I got a whole whack of women that were referred to us by the courts for abuse of their children, their abuse of their husbands or partners was frequent as well. We just didn't study it because there was no funds available, nothing to go after or do anything with that. Just, oh my gosh, that's so common. And maybe not fully 50%, but 40%, 30%, somewhere in there. It's way bigger than, oh, that rarely happens. No.
I've heard many experience of it also happening in a car where the guy's driving. Like honestly, it's come up a couple of times in the past couple of months where I've been talking to guys, and they've said that this happened. It just blew me away because it's dangerous, and they also have kids in the car as well.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. Anyway, yeah, it is what it
Anyway,
is.
that's the self other situation is really unreal. Colin, you're looking anxious to
Yeah,
get in.
thank you. I was curious about something you said earlier about stay-at-home moms, and you said when you're profiling, you'd hear it. When you said you'd hear it, is that the order in which they would reference? So they would start by perhaps talking about their kids when they would talk, and then they would talk about a situation, then they talk about themselves. Is that what you meant? Just hearing it in order?
The situation would be family. So it would be the kids, it would be the family, it would be themselves. And sometimes they would not even include their husband, although they were not divorced, separated, or anything. And all of a sudden, that was separate from everything else in their conversation and
Mhm.
fairly commonly occurred. So that always gave me pause for considerable concern. I needed to query, is he an abuser? Is he not? Is he just non um, a non-parental parental figure, like a dad that doesn't participate in family but is in the family full time? Yada yada yada, like all sorts of things.
Blair,
Mhm.
might this be a great opportunity? Do we have the Venn diagram would and be able to kind of show those that are watching on YouTube and everybody here the kind of the how self situation other works together in that diagram and kind of that ebb and flow?
Yeah,
As
I thought it was in this. I don't have it. Thank you, Jane. I see you busily doing your thing because I'm looking for it in our notes and it's not there. I thought it was put in there, but anyway, there we go.
okay.
Thank you, Colin.
Mhm.
Okay, so and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. Oh, Colin, can you copy
Sure.
that and put that in on the YouTube for people so they can.
Yes, I will. I'll have to open YouTube, but I will do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Might it be easier, Blair, just to screen share and
Sure, I will be I'll
through
just
it?
do this and oh yeah. And what I'm going to do now is just share this. Okay, here we go.
Ah, yeah, I was going to say, I just found another one that's even better. That one's great.
So this is the sweet spot. Tim, do you want to continue on?
Did you want to speak to this, Blair? Or I mean, I'm
I
happy.
definitely can. Like, because this was some of the research that I was doing at the time. And so I defaulted into self because self is the area that you can control. So this stuff here is a big deal.
And
Okay.
it's something you can control.
It's the only area that you can control. Absolutely true. This is an area of influence. Others you can influence, and situation you can influence, but you cannot control. And the balance here is getting it into the sweet spot where we have balance between self, other, and situation. That's critical. Now, it appears when you get into self, other situation in that magical balance area, and it appears magical when you get in there because all of a sudden you're sharing your stuff, but it's like you have such huge influence at that moment between both the situation and others. It's like you can control it, but you can't, and you're not. And that's where people get a little, I want to say, delusional because they have these experiences that where people, the situation and others align with the area of self. And the three of you are, the three areas are in almost near perfect alignment. And that's huge when that occurs. It's rare, but it does happen. Now, others is everybody else other than yourself. But if you're in there with somebody else, that's their self. So they have their own self other situation, and you're the other to them. And the two of you, if there's just two of you, you both make up the situation. Creating alignment in the area of describing the situation creates the optimum area for overlap between self other and then the situation. So if the other and you, the self, can discuss the situation and get alignment around that, all of a sudden changing yourself becomes possible to adapt to others, and others being in themselves can adapt themselves to you as their other. And that creates a very healthy, usually, situation. Any other questions or comments? Tim, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
This just might be a great place to add. One of the things that we have in our notes is what we call a disclaimer. It's just talking about this mind model can be applied to any other mind model, and it can also be a standalone mind model to provide additional clarity. Everything in life has a place in this construct, as Blair kind of just talked through. And with self situation other or self other situation, or whichever way, as we've discussed already, that you find yourself working with this, it's a blueprint for all other mind models, and all mind models are a part of life. And so this is one of my favorite mind models, one of them that I go to more often than not, because I can apply this to anything that I'm going through. I look at, myself, what is my part in whatever this situation is, or when I'm talking to somebody else, what do I have control over? What is my part in it? So self situation, another, really, it applies everywhere in this. And I wanted to ask those of you who are here, and if you're on YouTube, we'd love to, if you want to put the comment down below, we will go back and check out the comments and respond later. But how do you use self situation and other, or self other situation in your life?
What has it done for you?
Yes.
Shane, would you care to share?
I was literally just flicking my mic off, Becky. I'm trying to wrap my brain around, with what Tim said, and you know, having owned trucks and agriculture, a lot of things I do are by myself, so most of it is self and situation. There are others involved, but I've always thought self other situation. But I'm trying to wrap my head around just self and situation. Is there a mind model that reflects to just you and yourself? And I'm thinking, well, that's just, if your self situation, it's just basically the three E's: is this effective, ineffective, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just thinking back even the last few days of what situations have happened, and does that involve self and others, or what that involves? So it's highly effective because it's got a lot of neurons going through my brain.
One of the key things that I wanted to, like, Tim alluded to this, but I just want to reinforce it and state every part, every second of your life is always broken into self-other situation. You cannot escape it. Unless you are the last person on earth,
Yeah.
that is the only time where you can remove others from the scenario. Because I'm going to say almost always others in the scenario. And there's always a situation that you're in. So self and situation are two that are required to exist if you're not dead. Okay. And others are 99% of the time going to be there because it's going to be impacting you. Even like, that's one of the things that we did back in the day when we went out for the interventions crisis intervention runs with people who were potentially suicidal, self-other situation, people usually thought it was just all about themselves and their situation, and sometimes not even about the situation, just they didn't want to be part of this situation anymore. So that's was the motivation to end it all for themselves. However, you have family, you have memories of family. I am the last living birth, member of my birth family. So I've got a huge amount of situation. And prior to that, it was always a situation that had somebody else from my birth family until my sister passed. Now, I've been on my own that way for a few years, but I still have my children. So there is like this ongoing connection and legacy for others to be in your life, even if they're no longer with you, they still tend to influence what's going on.
Well, and
So,
something I was just thinking about as well, Blair, is even if we find ourselves in a certain situation, like for example, when I was driving truck, I found myself in the situation of driving down the road. There may not have been necessarily another right there or an other in the cab or a conversation or anything like that, but I was impacting others.
yes.
There were others on the road. There were others that were waiting on the shipment that I was bringing. So there is, even if the other isn't necessarily right there in the situation, it does impact others, usually down the road.
And
Yes.
this kind of what Tim and I were chatting about today was the whole others. So like, okay, so what's the whole adage? Like if you're in the woods, like if there's a tree that falls in the woods and there's nobody around, doesn't make a sound. Okay. So if I was running by myself, okay, myself situation, I'm running down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. What others are there? The tunes that I may be listening to inside my head, the bunny rabbits, jackrabbits, the cantaloupe, antelope that may be running 55 miles an hour. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to hamstring myself if I even try to kick up another gear. But it seems to be that our focus within self, other, or situation is really what drives the narrative and how we behave because of how we see it, our perception within that space, which I think is a really powerful thing when we talk about how self, other, situation is almost impossible to negate one of them. Like they work in concert, but how are they lined out? Are they all smushed together like a big ball because we don't understand, don't have clarity on our role, our situation, like the different components? Are they spread out where they're like, I'm not going to touch my friend, like the world's out to get me, others in situations are horrible, mean people, and I'm being affected? Like, have I removed myself in my own mind, my own behaviors from
And
those
it's
things?
interesting how many times we as human beings tend to give away our power, that self, to the other and to the situations that we find ourselves in. We don't, Blair talked about that sweet spot, that connection, and really that's where we want to play with others, with the situations that we find ourselves in. But a lot of times as human beings, we give that power away. We remove ourself and what we can control, what we can do in the situation, how we communicate with others, all those things. Like we remove ourselves and let the situations and the others impact us.
And I was curious, Blair, if you would mind sharing a little bit more about like the disconnection. So we talked about the sweet spot. These perfect circles are working beautiful together. Life is rosy. But what's the actual like functional situational things that we might experience so that we can kind of diagnose if we might be out of balance?
Okay. So one of the things my client was talking about, pardon me, was a friend, a mutual friend of his and another person I know, that actually introduced and got things connected, was this party that is normally he was very much of a socially talented individual. Let's put it that way. That was the terminology that was used. The issue here is that the young gentleman has pivoted in his life and is now, I believe, post-COVID, not like he withdrew and withdrew into himself. And so now he does not go out like he used to back in the day. So that becomes problematic for him. And my client tries to draw him out from time to time, but he doesn't stay out of his room. Basically, he just sort of goes in and plays games or watches, TV actively. And that has become his life. And unfortunately, he is, for lack of a better word, wealthy enough to be able to live that without consequence. So it's just something that he can indulge endlessly.
Oh,
Now, one of the key things that I found in my research on happiness is that we have to have problems in our lives that we overcome to identify clear happiness in our lives. And if we don't overcome even small-ish problems, we don't find happiness because life is this numbing, bland, flat thing. And so that becomes a critical piece of finding and building happiness and being able to overcome issues. Yes, Colin, that's great. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure, I didn't want to interrupt you, but stories without conflict are boring, and humans hate being bored. It's one of the most universal things about humans. Can't stand being bored, and we're willing to do just about anything to avoid it.
Exactly. But if stimulation, a challenge that is predictable, can get our brains more or less addicted to gaming, like to a game. And so it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's not a struggle per se. So we will just stay. We're in that numb spot, which is pretty sad, but we do it. Anyway,
No, I appreciate you sharing that too, because I think a lot of times we talk about these concepts, but seeing how it actually fits, how it shows up in real life is a powerful thing. And when we were prepping for this, we got into a pretty deep conversation. I'm curious, Colin, if you would be willing to share a little bit of your perspective on that angle that we went on as far as when we're dealing with self-other situation and how we're experiencing it, how our perception is from that. If we're not happy and we're in that, kind of blah space, maybe we're depressed, those kinds of things, how sometimes we attempt to deal with our problems that we think is working, but maybe it's not as effective as it could be.
Yeah, bringing up dissociation without saying the word.
They did it there.
Beating around the bush. Yeah. So we had a great conversation about dissociation, and I observed, especially recently, um, I don't know who knows this here, but we experienced a stillbirth this past month, which hardest experience of my life. And there was a very strong temptation to dissociate. And I recognized that historically that's exactly what I would have done, right? Because when there are uh, emotions that are overwhelming and that I didn't understand how to deal with, then what other option do I have except to hide, run away, separate myself from that, remove myself from that situation? Um, but this time was different. Thankfully, with mind models, I have a lot more self-confidence in my ability to deal with emotions. I'm not as afraid of them. And so I allowed myself to experience them. And a kind of mini stack came out of that, which I'm happy to share. But I recognize that dissociation can be extremely functional, extremely useful, but there has to be a reassociation. If you just keep kicking the can down the curb forever, well, you might be able to get away with it, but there's probably going to be some side effects of that. So knowing that, understanding that, I attempted to and was successful at staying very present to the pain, the experiences, the emotions as they came. And yeah, I'll share a mini stack for anyone who has
Oh, there you go.
practiced dissociation. Oh yeah, there it is. Colin's go-to mini stack. Uh, so if you've practiced dissociation, but then have struggled with reassociation, this is what I found effective for me, especially in this past month. And Blair put it in the chat, but I'll say it out loud for those who might be listening. So describing feelings was number one, is number one. Uh, Naming and labeling what I'm experiencing in the moment, bringing myself present to my body, being aware of what I'm experiencing. Safety versus comfort has been huge. It's not always necessary, but if one of those feelings that comes up is a feeling of fear, or uh, unsafety, or um, well, those are the primary ones, typically some sort of fear, then I also run through that. I've described that process before of just asking myself, how do I know I'm unsafe? Or what is it that I can identify that's a threat to my physical well-being in the moment, and helping myself to recognize the difference between safety and comfort. Acceptance has been my absolute favorite companion of recent months, especially this month, of simply accepting what I'm feeling, not judging it, not resisting it, not explaining it even, simply accepting I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling upset. I accept that I'm feeling upset. I accept that I'm feeling sad. And then the self RFQ, once I've named and labeled what I'm feeling, once I've accepted what I'm feeling, and I feel ready to do something, that getting resourceful. So just asking what might I do? What might I do? Opening myself up to possibilities for action.
Yeah. RFQ, for those of you that may not know it, is resource-focused questioning, and it is one of the, well, it is the tested model that we use in Mind Model Method Coach training. So people go through that and are able to apply it to themselves or others. And the very cool thing here is you don't, if you're applying it to yourself, you know the problem because that's how come you're applying it. But if it's for somebody else, you don't even necessarily need to know the problem. It's a process to work yourself through something. If you're or guiding somebody else through something, even if you know or don't know what their problem is, you don't have to learn it. So it's sort of like it was developed to be a burnout proof model. Well, when you apply it to yourself, you're already going through it. So therefore, that's less relevant.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin, for sharing that. I appreciate you. Our hearts are with you. And I loved how you really compared and contrasted a historical way of behaving. The disassociation, as we're talking about self, other, and situation. If something's not working for us or we don't like what's going on, it's very easy to remove ourselves from it, or make a case against the thing that we don't like so that we're justified in moving away from it. But really, as we use the 3 E's, so evaluation, external, externalizing and evaluating the things that are going on, then we can actually have a functional and a healthy experience with things and get traction in anything that we're dealing with, which is where this is such a powerful, powerful thing, but it does require us to engage. Self is a big deal. Being aware of yourself. I love it. Jacqueline, where am I in self-other situation? Where am I? How am I playing? With whom am I playing? I want to play, right? Evaluating those pieces. So if you think about your own worlds, things that you've been experiencing, one of the questions we wanted to ask, and we've kind of chatted about this a little bit, but what might you do to rebalance your circles? If you start thinking about, well, maybe I'm a little bit smushed, or maybe I'm a little bit more disassociated, what are some things that you might do to start to rebalance that for yourself. I have lots of heads down writing, taking notes.
Jane?
Well, while people are thinking about, well,
I
I'm
was
just
gonna
going to
say-
finish this. My thing here is what Colin actually described here was when you disassociate in that disassociated state, you quite literally take your circle and disconnect it from the other two. So yeah, exactly. Just so like pull them apart. So there is a Venn diagram, but it's three circles that are then pulled apart. And depending on how great the disassociation is, you can actually disassociate from not just self, but your view of the world can drop others or pull others out of the situation, or the situation out from both yourself and others. So you do not see any connection between any of those circles. Doesn't mean that it's not actually there. It's you don't behave to what's there. You behave to a reality, not a real thing that's actually going on. And if you stay there long enough, it's usually manifests as some form of depression or mental illness or something. So,
Jane, did
Okay, so can I ask you to repeat the question so that my answer sounds like it's within context, please?
What might you do to rebalance your circles?
So my first thing is our acronym ANANPU. I look at what am I know I'm aware of something, but what is it that I need to notice? Not what do I notice, but what do I need to notice? So I go into that evaluation and then take it back into, okay, now that I'm aware, what's the next part? And then go into that whole ANANPU process to where I get to understanding. So in fact, it was part of our discussion this week between my one daughter and I, that she kept saying, I believe that why counts. I think that, Blair is wrong. Sorry, Blair. That's what she said. But that's because she wanted to understand for herself what I called her what. But she was saying, why do I go here? Why do I go to this place? And so she was trying to look at, from a historical standpoint, where that may have come from, this behavior that she was specifically talking about, and what it was that made her, what she calls little Jackie, child Jackie, make that decision that this was the behavior that was going to be her go-to. And now that she's adult Jackie, looking at it and saying, that behavior is not serving me. She wants to know what the root cause is rather than saying, let's just change the behavior. And so she tried to turn it into an awareness notice situation. And sometimes it does play a difference. We've talked about abusive situation, abuse, people have gone through abuse and whatnot earlier in the program. And it wasn't until I had an aha moment that this behavior that I'm going through right now, I know what the source is. I know why, or what the event was, or what the situation was that makes me go into that Colin's word, disassociative state, or in the fight, flight, or whatever else you want to say, that freeze. That to me is a behavior that is a form of disassociation, because that was where I would go to when someone would yell at me. And once I recognized that this person right now, updating, this person right now that's yelling at me has nothing to do with that instant response or that conditioned response and behavior. And so getting present. So that's where I go with the ANANPU and getting to now, so that I can update to the situation. So that's my answer. And I'm working on naming and labeling, because I think that that's where the naming and labeling is what she was trying to do. She was trying to name and label what it was she was feeling when she made these behavior choices with little Jackie.
One
Blair,
of the key,
Does that make sense?
yes.
it does.
Okay. Sometimes I don't know if I'm circle talking
No,
or not.
it's fine. It's normal. However, I found testing wise, it's fine to let somebody go through that, and especially if they can track down and identify what that event was or sequence of events were. It's handy, but it's also not effective. The issue here is, and this is, I look for commonalities that are stable, not one-offs that are unique, because I can't work with one-offs as a coach or counselor. I can work with a process flow that is highly identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable.
Right.
So one of the things that I was able to look at by watching hundreds of people come up with their own situation, it's always unique to that person.
Right.
Now, the cool part about it is the behavior that is linked right after that is common to all. Although this is totally unique, the commonality is common to all. And that is, people learn how to habituate to this thing that worked in their brain one time in some cases, not repeatedly. It can just be a single scenario. And that can be things that are, it's the same process as a phobia. So you don't have to have multiple events happening in your life to habituate or have a phobic response become instantly locked in. And I am living proof of that. I used to mountain climb. Then I went up in the Sears Tower in Vancouver, Canada, in a glass elevator, and all of a sudden my knees felt weak and my tummy went blah, 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 and everything fell apart and I could barely breathe, heart palpitate, the whole 9 yards. And it is not necessary for it to be a causal relationship, other than the fact that those emotions, that cascade event occurred. And then the next time I went over something high that was like that, it occurred again. And well, it was the same, but it only took one event to make that pattern lock in. And it's habituated. So it becomes a habit pattern. Now, those are not common, but they happen commonly among people. Fortunately, that doesn't happen commonly to that person because it's not everything that's habituated. It's these odd things, but that process is very common person to person who describes their situation. And when you see literally hundreds of people having their own unique thing, but it's a habituated process, afterwards, I look at the habituated process and say, what can I do about that, not the unique thing?
Mhm.
Because
Right.
this is the thing that we can actually address, because it is common to all. Or, in fact, I don't know of any exceptions to the rule, is what I was going to say. So we can change habits. And that means that it went from an internal state, as you described, as I described, all of this internal stuff happening to me, as it happens to whatever the conditions are, it's always an internal state. And that hunch of mine is that the state happens to be past based without a past. Okay. In other words, it's a present, but it's not past. Okay. But it's perceived as past by the brain. And it's emotions that are loaded. We hold this thing as though it's true, and it is in the moment, but it's this collapsed past future loop, collapses in the moment, and we habituate to that. And whenever we hit this past future loop, we're screwed. Until we figure out a path out, and that is always 100% of the time, again, getting yourself to the present. And Colin's story about what he was doing here was describing his feelings in the moment. So it didn't overwhelm him. It was not comfortable. It was not anything that he wanted, like not a lovely place to be, but it was present and it was real. Not a reality, but very real. And he dealt with what was real in the moment, for real. Okay, that's my.
But there is so much that we could go into with self-situation and other. Unfortunately, we are
That point.
at that top at that time to move into wrap up. So with that, unless anybody has any other questions or anything that they want to bring up right this moment, going once, twice. I'm gonna pass the torch to Colin for a wrap up.
Thanks, Tim. I'm looking through our list, and I believe everybody here is a regular, so I won't bother explaining what wrap up is. Brent, would you like to kick off the wrap up?
Yes. Yeah, so for me, tonight was the digging into the imbalance was something that came up, digging more into that and seeing that and what that was and how that might look, um, what those things are. And then, you know, using the mind models, you can focus and evaluate and to see to help yourself come back into balance, find out where you're at. What those mind models are you use may be different for each person, but that and at the end there, Blair, I was listening to it, but I'm like, man, this is a little bit deeper than I was thinking, and I could, that piece alone can be its own, looking into that. So I was like, okay, I was trying to think about it. I'm like, you're losing me a bit, I was like, this seems like a bit much for me right now, but I did like it. I just, trying to comprehend it at the same time. It's like, man, that's a lot more. So I did enjoy that piece too. So, that's the beauty of these, that we, things come up and we have nuggets that pop up that aren't planned and 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 turn out to be great. So I give it a 8 for me tonight.
Thanks, Brent. Leslie, would you like to participate in the wrap up tonight?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to give 9.5. This evening was timely. Yesterday, some things went not as good as what should have, and I got caught in a do loop. And it didn't matter who was around, I was doing it. We have family, a niece who's been going through Alberta and the Rockies here, and was here a week ago with a part of her group. She's one of 4 adults and 10 scouts. Youngest 11, to a little bit older, but amazing how they're traveling across Canada. The way that they're doing it is suspect for someone who has traveled. We were expecting them for lunch here at our house yesterday, and so all the excitement of getting ready for that, and we get a phone call. Yeah, we've got a tire and we're on the side of the highway, and where they were is extremely busy. It's 110 kilometers per hour, and people don't stop for anything. So the fear factor did jump in of 10 little kids on the side of a highway, predominantly tractor trailer traffic. And anyhow, to get that resolved and everything, it was went out there, got the tire, brought it back into town, into Edmonton here to my daughter-in-law's, tire shop and automotive shop and to get it fixed and get it all back out. But it was a challenge. It was we got it done. We were successful. Everybody is alive. But still, even going out there the first time, seeing kids between the highway and the car. There's one little guy who just didn't, but that's all it takes to ruin a trip like that. They're all from Montreal area. So like that's 3,000 kilometers away from here. So it was a challenging day and I just got caught. There's nothing that I could do to get out of that. So this self-other situation discussion today, I sure wish I had been thinking of these terms yesterday when all this was going on. It would have been good.
Well, now you have the reminder. Hopefully it will help
Now
you.
I have the reminder. I think I've got another post-it note going up. Maybe right here. Yep.
No, you got to put it on someone else's head so you can see it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I know I listened a lot, but it just reminded me a lot tonight.
Thank you, Leslie. See, Christy, would you like to participate in the wrap up? You've been quiet tonight.
I've got like smoke coming out my ears. So crazy, so much, so many different, I don't know if I want to call them little stories or whatever, just going through all the things from even going through my model coach training earlier in the year and going through self-other situation. Just reminding me of, that I can only control myself and then influence with other situation. And at that time, it's so ironic sometimes, but my daughter and I were coming home from an appointment and we got caught behind a great big prairie fire. And so we were in a situation, and so I could only control myself, and we had to decide to turn around and reroute. So instead of panicking and, woe was me and what are we going to do, I was able to use an influence on, take a breath and where we're going, and this is what we need to do. So there was that. And then I also was, going through notes and stuff from doing that. The reminder of same situations happen and everybody feels them differently or whatever. So being able to align and know that same thing's happening to us, but I see it differently, I feel it differently, and being fine with that. And then I think Becky was saying something about how we remove ourselves from, I got to put my eyes on, I can't read what I wrote. So many different things. And then I learned also that it was okay to set some healthy boundaries also in those areas and sometimes too. And then I really love calling your little go-to stack. I think I have my own, but I just didn't realize it till you wrote it out. And I really love kind of your order actually, and I probably use that a lot too. And so then I was going through and I saw where we had went over the balance formula with judgment and evaluation and those things, and how, the one with the judgment can lead to misunderstanding, and then evaluation can help understand, and then still putting you in we have same situations that we need to balance out, or maybe not even need to balance out, but just understand that you see it differently and I see it differently, even though it's the same thing. And then when we get to the self RFQing, then we have that power of choice on where we go from here, kind of thing. And so anyway, amazing night, lots of good things, lots of all the stuff. So 10 for me, and thank you.
Wow, 10. That's big. Thank you, Christy. Shane, would you like to participate in the wrap up tonight?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And well, Christy getting her readers on, that's its own situation, but Yeah, I know. A 9.5 for me. I observed tonight that even though, as that now, scenarios that I believe are just self and situations are truly self others and situations, as I have many others that are close to my heart and in my circle. Your comment in the chat, Colin, about your internalized versions of others. Are they real? Are they imagined? Are the voices in your head that you choose to listen to, don't listen to? Those others are, even though they might be imagined, are still real because you're still talking to them in your head. Um, Jane's comment about the litter, does that affect others even though that they aren't there? And that made me think, well, my self situations affect others even though they might not be present in that self situation. So just, yeah, it was, you know, my thoughts are, inside my own perceived self situations highly affect others. Just a totally new way to evaluate my day to day activities on the ranch. And of course, I'll reiterate the what Christy said about your mind model stack. That's solid gold right there. So very much. And yeah, lots of love and prayers to you and your family.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Jane, would you like to participate in the wrap up tonight?
Thank you. Yes. It's self-other situation, and it was a hard one for me to understand in the beginning, even though it looked like it was straightforward and, oh, I got this. And it wasn't until I actually had someone get mad at me because I didn't understand. And so it's something that I pay attention, I've learned to pay attention to, but it also helped me realize that or help me see that everyone has a different process. And I've used this example before. The only time that my husband and I, if we happen to start to argue, it has to do with process. And he doesn't get that. And I would say, wait a minute, stop, 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 stop. You guys have heard me say this before. 4 + 5 = 9, and 3 + 6 = 9, and 8 + 1 = 9. We're all getting there. We're just not getting there the same way. And we're all allowed to have our own way. And that is how we get to that sweet spot in the middle of that Venn diagram, is realizing that, that we can, we don't have to do it your way. We don't have to erase ourselves and just become you. We don't have to do that. We can be who we are. And listening to I always love listening to Blair because he helps enlarge my brain or my understanding in several ways. And I appreciate his comments, and I look forward to having a further conversation with my daughter based on his comments. So it was definitely, I was going to originally say a 9, but I'm going to bump it up to 9.33.
Very specific.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Shannon, would you like to participate in the wrap up?
Sure. All right, let's turn that up. Okay. This was a fun one, and I loved, Tim, the way you kicked it off by asking about the order, because that's something that I've always wondered, just to be curious. And I thought it was a fun conversation to learn that how they position themselves in their story gives you information about the person you're talking to. And so it's not, again, like your comment a couple of weeks ago about the fluidity, and we're always in a mind model, and how we move through that information and learning to tune into it slightly differently, what that can tell us about the person we're talking to, or even about ourselves. So that was really fun. Just picturing it, based on the situation, where am I prioritizing myself? And then looping back to your question at the end, Becky, what might you do to rebalance your circles? And I think even asking the question is the first step to doing that, because then you are tuning in your unconscious competence in the background to look for the imbalances and to notice, wow, I think that self is getting smooshed in here. I need to pull it back out and create some clarity. Even just finding that clarity internally. Maybe your external, throwing things around, maybe your external circumstances don't really change at all. But for me, specifically this last week, somebody asked me that question last week, and I've been thinking about it every single day. And I don't always have an answer, but asking the question has allowed me to start to notice where I was smooshing and to start to pull myself out. And it's been a weird way of taking some of the burden off of my shoulders for things that felt heavier than they needed to be, just because I was overlapping. And so, like I said, maybe circumstances externally don't change, but creating some internal order in that way using the Venn diagram, the picture in your mind, has been really helpful. And so that's something I'm glad we're talking about this, because it's an extension of something that I've been working on myself, just with all the things that I have coming up, getting ready for my surgery and finding time for people who want my time, finding time for situations that need to be dealt with before, all the things that, get condensed into that space. Um, Let's see. There were a lot of really fun nuances to the conversation that were very noteworthy and noodle worthy. I appreciated, Colin, your conversation about disassociation and how it can be useful and functional, but the need to have tools to reassociate and to have a process for that. Because that was something very relevant, especially with everything that I'm dealing with coming forward, looking at how to keep myself connected. But when pain is present and there are circumstances that you are in and out of consciousness, how do you reconnect with yourself in a quick and efficient way that's grounded, that's functional? And so that's one of my and even thinking about self other situation in the process of going under anesthesia, and you have to park, you have to know you've done your research and you know who you're trusting and the influence that they have, and you have a moment where you're not with yourself. That's one of the hardest things for me in the whole world, is to know that, there are moments when I may or may not be able to take full care of myself, and putting that in someone else's hands is really, really, really hard. So it's this mental, the visual, I love bringing up the Venn diagram, but also realizing that there are processes and mind models in place that got me to this point, and there are processes and mind models that will get me to the next point. So thank you for sharing that in specific, and your mini stack as well. Yeah, really, I could go on, but I won't. So we'll leave it at a 8.5 for me tonight. Thank you. We'll bump it up to a 9. We'll give it a 9.
Okay. Well, thank you, Shannon, and I'll be thinking about you with your upcoming operations.
Thank you. And it's wonderful to see you this evening and to have you back.
Thank you. Jackie, I believe that you left earlier, but I still see you in here, so I'm just going to ask, if you are here, would you like to participate?
She put her evaluation in the chat.
Oh, okay. I might have missed that.
Do you see it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll read that. So, 8 for me tonight. I've been using self-other situation for the past 4 days with a group of friends who are all very different and opinionated. I use this to keep myself balanced and not buy into others' ineffective attitudes. Thank you, Jackie. All right. Well, I guess I'll go here. 9 for me tonight. I really appreciate having a safe environment and people to share life with. So thank you for that. And yeah, there were so many different details about self-other situation that came up that didn't come up in prep that I hadn't thought of. So thank you, Blair, for sharing some life skills college background too. I always really enjoy stories from that. And Tim and Becky, thank you for leading. You were very effective in that tonight. And I already gave a number, right? Yeah, I think I said 9. Okay. Tim, would you like to share your wrap up?
I'd love to. Yeah, tonight's a 10 for me. I'm echoing Christy here. Tonight was a 10. I not only because I personally love this mind model, self situation other is and I think I've shared this before on the BDEs, but it's my absolute favorite. It is my go-to. It's helped me in so many places in my life. Not only with the loss of our daughters, but moving forward after. Um, the highlight for me is having you on tonight, Colin. I got to admit, it is so great seeing you here. It's so great to have you back. And I one of the comments that I think it was Patty made earlier is we're a community, and we're all here for one another. And all of us as mind model coaches, we get more effective every day, working on ourselves. And anyway, it's great having you back. It's great being here. Love this community. And tonight the discussion what you shared, Colin, around how you're thinking through your process, your mini stack, how you're working through the dissociation, the reassociation. I can connect with that so much, and what we went through and what we did to just create enough space to go through the different situations and the others that were involved, and just that enough of a gap and a dissociation enough for us to work through it effectively, and then to reassociate. And so important to reassociate. I know for us, when we were going through it, one of the things that we did was just slowly changing our environment. That way, because our routines had changed. Certain routes we took when we were driving would bring up memories and thoughts and all sorts of things. And so just slightly different times a day, taking that route, going a little bit different direction, same route, but taking one different turn, changing our house a little bit, all these little things that just created that enough space for us to re-engage with life and be able to move forward. And so just hearing how you're thinking through it, how you're working through it, was just gold. And then just real quick, Brent, your comment earlier about, we can never truly feel what another person is feeling. We're each individuals, and we each, even if we're going through the same situation, nobody is going to feel the exact same way as we are. And, and we've mentioned before here on the Blair Dunkley experience, you can never truly understand somebody either. You can relate, you can connect on a certain level, but we can never truly feel and or understand what somebody else is. And so just keeping that in mind as we go through the Venn diagram, as we're working with different situations and different others, it's just important to remember that we each go through and experience it individually. So just such an in-depth conversation, and could go so much deeper, but it was great. And thank you, everybody, for your contribution tonight, even though I know some of us we didn't get to. That's it for me.
Thank you, Tim. And I'll say that you and Becky are the ones who inspired me to lean into this community in the first place, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So thank you. Becky, would you like to share a wrap up tonight?
Yes, I will. 9.89, just to be fun. Self-other situation is a core piece, and I have found the conversation tonight very robust. We went in depth on a lot of things, a lot of pieces brought up that has been shared before, like noodling on it. I find it fun and definitely curiosity provoking for me to think about, how am I engaging? How consciously aware or intentional am I within my circles? And when my life is it feels as if it's imploding, the story starts to come in, it's likely because I'm smushing somewhere. I haven't described my feelings or named and labeled things effectively enough to help me have the balance. And what Tim was sharing from his wrap up just made me think about, that's a beautiful example of the fluidity of self-other and situation. These are not static, hard, concrete things. There's times and places and seasons where they do interflux, and they do play, and how we choose to engage. Sometimes we can allow situations and others to steamroll us, and we're feeling like we're at the bottom of the doggy pile, but we also still have the power to be able to create that space for ourselves and to be able to move things into an effective place for us. So I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Patty, would you like to participate in the wrap up?
Yes, sir, I would. Thank you. I've taken so many notes tonight. I love the things that people have been sharing and getting more and more insight. Self-other situation has not been my go-to. And I remember hearing Tim say that and being really intrigued, like, okay, so what's the big deal about self-other situation? We've all got them, it's like, this isn't that big a deal. I'm not impressed. And tonight, oh my gosh, the depth and the information about violent agreements. I've, I've had a couple of those. Shannon's laughing because we had one just a couple days ago. And, we're both just passionately going at it. And she finally looks at me. She says, so we're in agreement. I'm like, yeah, we really are. And I thought, oh my gosh, so much energy that didn't need to be there if we had worked it out differently. But exploring the order of self situation, other situation. Tim, that was a brilliant question to begin with. Again, something I had never considered. Colin, your mini stack for reassociation, to take what is often an unconscious process for me and putting names and labels and process to it so that it can be identifiable, duplicatable, repeatable, duplicatable, is so effective, very impactful for you to share that and to share your experience with us tonight. So thank you for that transparency and that vulnerability. Blair, sharing your historical experiences and what you learned over the years with those you interacted with is also just rich for understanding. So for me, I was going to give it a 9.78 until Becky went with a 9.86, which means mine might have to become a 9.87. Anyway, so great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. Blair, would you like to wrap up the wrap up?
Sure. It was fun tonight for me. Starting off with the mind models for life transformation and just all that stuff that is now able to be organized and quantified and codified for change, how we transform our lives. It's really fascinating to see that. And then your question there, Tim, like, so the debate on self-other situation, self-situation another, and then being able to share that. Most people don't weight that as important, but when you see the correlation between somebody who's like a mom who's the lowest person on their totem pole and just building everybody else up, but they don't have any real self-confidence or self-worth or even that much self-esteem at all, but always building everybody else up. And then you recognize it's their situation is actually above them, and above that is others. And they are propping up all of that. And they're the foundation, albeit an unhealthy foundation for them. And then their child grows up and leaves, and they collapse. And they don't know how to cope with life. And then their husband says, well, you've got no life, wife. I don't want you as a wife. And the divorce happens because she spent no time figuring out herself. And you see that model repeat over 35 years a few hundred times. And you go, wow, that's not a one-off. It may be only a 1 in 300, 1 in 400, but it's enough when you have, 10,000, 20,000, you see it happening and you see the pattern. And that way it's quantifiable. And you go, wow, that's huge. And then here I get to share the patterns that I've seen, point them out, and people go, yeah, I agree with that. Those are the patterns. But this is the forum that I get to share now because you guys have enough history. You can evaluate the patterns, see the patterns for yourselves because of your own knowledge of the mind models, but also the life experience. Before I used to describe the mind model in the life experience, but they dismiss the mind model, but stick with the life experience and go, it's just life experience. It's just life. No, it's these behavioral patterns that are identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable. And then, Colin, your healthy reassociation models stack, a mini stack, and then the application. And then seeing how solid you are appearing tonight on the BDE. I can't say it's shocking, but I can say it's shocking because of how effective. I'm not shocked by it, but I am shocked by it all at the same time. How integrated you are, how okay you are in a non-okay situation, and you're still okay. And that's the power of the mind models. It's all about getting yourself back to a new normal fast. And I would argue that your new normal is better than your previous normal. You are more solid now than you've ever been. And it's bizarre to see this. I can see it on your face. I look at you and go, yeah, you've been through one hell of a tough time. I mean, people say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I have limits with that normally. But I say when you go through tough stuff with mind models and you figure out things like this, you almost always are stronger. I still haven't seen a situation where you're not. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And that's the truth. Okay. I'm going to give it a 10. I was going to split hairs, but I'm just going to go with Christy and go, yeah, this is a good one for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Who's taking the outro tonight?
I will take us out. Thank you guys, everyone. Thank you so much for spending a little extra time with us. This 90 minutes has been incredible. We covered a lot and yet we scratched the surface. So we just want to remind you guys that Blair has an opportunity for you guys to get all historical and ongoing notes from the BDE experience. And we call it an experience because it is an experience. From episode 318 onward, you can go to blairdunkley.com/BDE-insider notes. So if you've loved what you've heard tonight, if you're out there on YouTube and you want to get more depth, you want to be able to study it on your own, go over some of the things, maybe your learning style is I love seeing it, but I'm a reader. I like to have the physical stuff. Then please make sure that you go there, get your hands on it. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to, again, go deeper. And then as well, Blair has got a lot of great goodness that he's bringing to the world with mind models. Mind Model Mastery Secrets podcast currently has 4 episodes with more coming. You can access that and listen in at mindmodelmastery.podbean.com. And if you guys were intrigued with the things that we were talking about, we went kind of deep and wondering how you might be able to become a part of Blair's upcoming Mind Model Method Coach training, September 16th through 19th and September 30th through October 3rd, make sure that you email Blair at rewiringthemind.com. You can get more details on what that might look like for you. And again, you guys, thank you for tuning in with us. If you're on YouTube, please make sure you comment, like, and subscribe, and share with someone. If something that you heard tonight really resonated, piqued your curiosity, please make sure that you share these episodes with other people so that we can get the word out on how mind models can help you enhance your life, have a higher quality of life, be more effective in any aspect that you choose to focus in with mind models. And join us next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll catch you next week, guys. Thanks again. Have a good night.